do an introduction. Oh, it's a Friday. Hi, everyone. Welcome to People Who Make Things. I am your host, Christine Lee, sales engineer with Inductive Automation. Today's guest is Adrienne Harvey, who has 2 decades of experience, gold certified in ignition. And I'm really excited to have her on this episode because her background is just incredibly diverse and just fun. And instead of me telling you about Adrienne and her experiences, it would be a lot more fun to hear it directly from herself. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, first off, I would love for them to understand why you're dressed up as bacon and why my
Oh,
dog is dressed up as a pumpkin.
oh yes. We sorry, we are recording this episode on Halloween 2025, October 31st, 2025. Um, yeah, I am a bacon because I wore this costume for a marathon, not for myself, but my friend was running her first marathon. It was called the Flying Pig, and bacon made sense. And it's been, being reused because I care about planet Earth, and I promise I'm not lazy. But I
Like,
love your pumpkin.
well, thank you. I'm about to go put this pumpkin back on her chair, but I had to show her
Okay.
off because I knew you were going to dress up for Halloween. And Lola, the dog, I wanted to show off her pumpkin costume, and
I
she's loved her
appreciate it.
favorite. So, hang on a second.
It's all good.
All right. So you were asking about my background.
Yes.
So I have a really interesting background. So I have a computer science degree with a digital arts focus. And what's kind of been interesting about that is it's allowed me to bring technology into a number of different areas and across a number of different roles in the past 2 decades. And that includes e-commerce, that includes web development, as well as automation. So what's fun for me, especially with ignition, is with perspective, that pulls on all of the experience that I have of web design, because it's like, oh, these are familiar words. And while vision is great, and I've certainly done a lot of work in vision, perspective is just like, oh, we're back, excellent. So that's been really kind of nice.
Absolutely.
Across the hobby life, I've always done electronics projects, 3D printing for longer than a lot of people. I learned that at a makerspace probably in like 2015. So it's been a while. So that's always been kind of fun. I found an Iggy and printed it, which was
It's so
fun.
cute.
Right.
I do want to ask you, so you have a wealth of knowledge and experience. How did you get into industrial automation and kind of like the industry that you are in now?
So, fun story. Many years ago, actually, the summer before I went to college, I took a tour of a bakery plant. And for whatever reason, they liked the questions I was asking. I'm known for being incredibly curious. I want to know how things work, I want to know all the context. And by the end of the tour, they were essentially like, hey, we would love for you to be an intern here during the summers and the holidays. And even though it wasn't a direct one-to-one with my major, it was, I liked the place, I liked the people, and I said, sure. And so for 5 summers, I was working alongside industrial engineering students and just kind of seeing all this really cool automation, like the whole process of making a pie on an industrial scale, or bread, or muffins. Chocolate muffin day, when that is. You're gonna pull up into that parking lot, and it's a wonderful smell. But seeing all of the different synchronization of big silos, micro ingredients, depositors, conveyors, all this stuff, it was really fun to see. Besides, if you needed something to be taken to the control room, I was your go-to. I loved the control room, all the screens, like, oh, you could see what was going on anywhere in the plant. Just totally fascinated by that. And so that was 5 summers. And then, I got into e-commerce. I started a few of my own companies, but that memory always stuck with me which was why about 4 years ago, I was on Twitter, back when Twitter was Twitter. And one of my friends that I don't even remember why we were friends in the first place was talking about, oh, hey, I need more people at my company who can work on ignition. I'm like, oh, what's ignition? And I had just finished an online course. I love online courses. If I don't have one going, that means there's something wrong in my life. I've always got one or two going. And I had just finished a really amazing one in embedded machine learning. Super good. I absolutely recommend it. It's from Edge Impulse. But I just finished that. I was like, all right, what am I going to learn next? And I see Alex puts up a link to Inductive University. And I'm like, what is this? Oh, it's free? Okay. Game on. I started on it immediately. And I was like, Alan Bradley, I remember seeing that on a thing at the bakery. That must be, oh, right, PLCs, it's all coming back. And so I got in there, finished that, got, and then a few weeks later, Alex is back on Twitter again from Corso Systems, and he's like, "Hey, we need more people. We have this big project, and if you've done Inductive University, talk to me." I was like, "Hey, I did actually do that." He's like, "Let's have an interview." So I interviewed, and it seemed like a good fit, and I was there for 3.5 years. And immediately jumped right into ignition, got core certified, and then, got gold certified, and have been just learning and learning and learning ever since. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Back when I did Inductive University as an intern,
Oh, okay.
right out of school, or I was finishing up senior year of college, um, it was so like it was also very good resource because it was peak COVID. I graduated in 2020.
Oh my
So
gosh, that's right.
I
Oh,
yeah, so it was like I don't have like the opportunity to have hands-on experience on a field.
right.
But Inductive University taught me a lot. Um, First of all, I didn't even know what a PLC was. But second of all, it was so thorough that but really accessible and easy to digest as a person who's coming into that world for the first time. So I really enjoyed it. So I'm really glad to hear that you also loved Inductive University.
No,
Good stuff.
no, it's super useful. Like I was moving for a customer, they were moving their servers, and they had a new IP address, new actual physical server, and remotely I was putting the gateway on there, putting all their projects on there, hooking everything back up. And there were a few times I actually referenced Inductive University, like, okay, am I doing all this right? Because they had transaction groups going, had to go and make those go again. A lot of like all those little tiny things. It was great to have that resource there to double check and make sure everything was running. My goal was to have everything back in place before anyone could notice that something might have not been running again yet, And I got pretty close to that. So, oh yeah, it was fun. I was like, look, guys, we're gonna do our best, but there are so many settings and so many little things and menus upon menus that we're going to miss something. How to reach me. We'll fix it immediately. And but that was a surprisingly seamless process. And part of it was that information was so handy.
You all, there you go. You all are incredibly creative, for better or worse, but mostly better.
Something I've been kind of interested in just as a topic of like, okay, well, how do we use LLMs in a manufacturing setting that is realistic and actually useful for people? And I think a lot of that might be, in my own theory, the things that roll around in my noggin. It's like, okay, how do we, teach some of our institutional knowledge? So, like, let's say you're a new hire, you're a new operator, and Joe on another shift has been there for 40 years. How can we use an LLM to kind of share his wisdom with other shifts and with other people. And there's a lot of people with a lot of knowledge that are retiring and are going to continue to retire. And it's like, okay, well, how could we use LLMs to kind of distill that knowledge, um, in a form of documentation that people are going to use and use easily, and not be like, well, you can't retire until you write out this novel of documentation, because that's just awful. We don't wish that on anyone.
Right. No, I that's a really interesting use case idea because yes, I mean that is an issue. And we also talk about, the generation, like in attracting newer generations to this
Right.
field and to this industry. Because like when I stumbled into industrial automation, it was on accident. I didn't look for it. I didn't know it existed. Now I'm in it. It makes sense, right? But yeah, it would be, and people have such, and this is what I really love about the industrial automation industry. There are so many people with so much knowledge,
Right.
so many stories. How do we propagate that appropriately to um the future, not only the next generation, but like the generations and generations, and how do we add to that source
Right.
of knowledge?
For sure. The other kind of fun thing about that, and I think where perspective really shines, is, so many times you'll go into a brownfield factory setting, and the words that come to my mind immediately are, oh, retro computing. When you see these old style screens, they make sense to me, but I've seen a few different iterations of computers. But then you bring in, some of, recent graduates of either high school or college, and they're used to these slick interfaces, and there's a whole language of our phones. And with perspective, it has that look and feel, or can, where people, you don't have to teach somebody how to use one of these phones. They intrinsically know what to do. And I look forward to a time when we can design screens that way. And so, minimize the need for extensive training, because, hey, look, we have this shared vocabulary of interfaces and symbols, and this is just like anything else. And I don't know, I think that's very possible, especially with perspective.
And that also brings up the idea of like accessibility in
Oh, yeah.
general. Like how do we make things accessible, not only in terms of, okay, you can actually access information, I guess, and but also like how do we make things, so for example, for colorblind
Right.
users, people who may not be 100% familiar with the language. How can MCP module, how can LLMs, how can AI help support that? And yeah, so lots of great things.
Yeah. The red and green thing. Oh, even so, statistically, there's a large number of men who are red green colorblind. And then on top of it, depending on who you're talking to out in the world, if you're talking to an electrician, or you're talking to a different kind of engineer or whatnot, red and green, if they can't see those colors, mean drastically different things. Like red might mean stop, red might mean go. And there's, depending on what screen you're looking at, who designed it, and when and where it is, that can get very confusing very fast. And it's just a simple color choice. Something I wish we could see more HPHMI out in the great big world out there. um, it's this kind of personal soapbox. If a screen is moving around and exciting, in the world of high performance HMI design, that means something's wrong. If it's blinking, it's not going to be blinking because it's HPHMI, but you're going to have all of these alarms and things like that, and it's an exciting screen. It should be boring, unless there's something you really need to take a look at. But a lot of times, people are, oh, this screen looks so boring. We need a more exciting screen. And I'm like, oh, Do you? You know,
Boring is
when my
good.
when my friends travel, do you know what I say to them? I say, I hope you have a boring flight because you don't want an exciting flight. Okay. And I feel the same way about screens. If it's an exciting screen, that's not good.
High performance HMIs are I love them. It reminds me of one thing that my dad told me. Uh so he used to be a chemist, and he would go to plants and see do chemist things. I don't know what chemists do. Sorry, dad. But he would see operators be like stare at the screen for hours and hours on end, and he was like, just remember the people that are going to be using your screens when you're designing, because it's not just you, it's these people that are going to be staring at your screens, and just keep that in mind. I was like, thanks, dad.
Yeah. No, it's so important because if you think about it, that's a third of their day, 8 hours. There's also one third of their day they're asleep, we hope. Um, so that's half of their waking time that they're spending with your screens. Um, and that's an important thing to remember and a big responsibility. So design nice screens, everyone.
So I have attended 3 ICCs so far, and out of those 3 ICCs, two of them you have been on the stage.
Oh
In
wow.
2023, you were in the Build-a-thon,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
and that's how I first like encountered you.
Oh
And
boy.
then 2025, this year, I went to your session on your very high performance screen.
Oh yeah.
How does it feel just being on the screen, or not screen, being on the stage?
I was telling everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, are you worried about the presentation you're giving in 2025?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I had months to write that." The other one I had like the day before for Build-a-thon. And so much easier. Build-a-thon, absolutely loved the experience. And as I was telling somebody else, I'm so happy for other people to experience that. It is incredibly high pressure. Like it is intense. And I remember telling Bill and Marguerite, who I was working with on the Build-a-thon, I was like, I think the people from Inductive Automation watched a lot of Lego Masters. I'm getting a Lego Masters vibe. Like they're coming in here, they want some sound bites. I've watched a lot of Lego Masters. I'm going to try to give them some sound bites that they'll like. And so we were working on the Lego Masters model with that, which I think was probably a pretty wise thing. Um, but it was great, and I loved that experience. But by the time the actual event came along, the conference, we were all just like, okay, all right, wait, now what are we doing? Oh right, it's ICC, we should go see some sessions. And your brain's just like, what am I doing? And you still have that presentation to do at the end. And it was a lot. Again, absolutely loved the experience. What an opportunity. But it was a lot easier to prepare a talk with a little bit more time ahead.
You are so creative.
Thanks.
So you have the eyes to also see that there is so much potential in just everyday things.
Oh, for sure.
Um, and in just, everyday problems where you could have like you could manually do whatever, but you were like, yeah, let me just create a maker edition project. Let me just do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. At some point, I'll have to show you my road trip project, which is so fun. You'll have that map module in
Yeah.
there, or map component. It's not a component. But yeah, I was using Meshtastic, and I was driving across country and sending the coordinates, and it was plotting them on the map real time. So Meshtastic to Raspberry Pi up in Illinois, um, Node-RED, unpacking the Meshtastic information from Node, then taking out the information I wanted and repackaging it into, re-encoding it into Sparkplug B, and then Ignition Maker Edition, snatching up that Sparkplug B and putting it on the map, and then also saving some comments so that later on, I had a little captain's log. I could be like, hey, this was a good barbecue restaurant.
Oh my
So mark little points of interest along the way and come back and look them up later. Oh wait, where was that? Oh, that's right. That was in Ohio right after we got over the border coming from West Virginia. That was the barbecue place. And here it is. Here are its coordinates. So there was a lot of fun with that, and they could show off.
Did you also put down the location of Mothman?
Yes, I did. So
Yeah,
that
I
was
think I
unrelated.
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a
No,
screenshot project.
it was, it was awesome to see because that would, would open up so much possibility for people who love road tripping
Oh yeah,
and also like safety.
yeah,
Like if I want to know where you're going, I'm gonna put a
right.
mesh stick on your car.
Exactly. You can look at tracker. It's got a little GPS in there, and so I had it, automatically, timestamp, GPS coordinates, and then if I had put a comment, so there was a text function there. So but it could be any number of things. Could also test for air quality. If FedEx is here soon, I'm also going to be doing some radiation testing just to see what, yeah, I know. I
What?
love sensors. So in general, ton of different sensor data around here. And of course, there's a lot you can do with data too, but I'm interested in like background radiation. And we have a lot of there's radon in a lot of different places up here. There's also, I recently found out in Red Gate Woods, over there in Willow Springs, there is buried, there's a marker about the Manhattan Project, and no one has taken one of these little sensors over there yet. So it's in a park. There's a hiking trail. I'm like, all right, who wants to go on a hike? Let's get some data. Someone actually has taken one of these sensors over there, and there's some little red dots on the map. It's yeah, yeah,
That's awesome. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
wild. There's all these neat products. I was talking to a kind of a technology partner. I don't know if you're familiar with Sorba. They exhibited at ICC, and they have a really accessible machine learning platform that ties into Ignition very, very well. And they have a similar kind of trial licensing, the 2-hour reset. And so I've got it running. I had a spare laptop. I put Ubuntu server on. And so I've got that running here. And now I'm like, ooh, what am I going to get data from? What am I going to learn? The healthiest possible route to walk around here with my dog in terms of air quality, in terms of low radiation. And you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of fun things to learn, and like something to throw data into. Well, sign me up.
I think it's so fascinating and uh admirable. Um because I also want to be data driven
Yeah.
in my life. Someone today mentioned getting, if there is training available, getting training or just a deep dive into Sorba's product.
Yeah. Mhm.
I attended recently an event co-hosted by Inflection Point, an
Okay.
integrator, and Sorba AI, and we also sponsored the series of events. It's called Now We're Cooking.
Okay. Oh, I see that.
Oh my gosh, what a fun time! And I've what they gave me a paddle. No, a
Oh,
cutting
it's a
board.
cutting board. I was like, what did you
Yeah,
do?
and in the back, I don't know if people can see, it's Inflection Point, Inductive Automation, and
Oh,
Sorba AI. So shout out to Sorba
yeah.
AI and Inflection Point. I
For
love my cutting
sure,
board.
for sure. And I met someone from Inflection Point. just before one of the keynotes, and like, what a cool company too. Like, so
Mm-hmm.
many neat people involved in this industry, and the partners, and with inductive automation, it's been a I mean, I had a blast at ICC. Like, it was hard to, like, it's like, okay, I gotta rest, I gotta go to sleep, starting early tomorrow. But you get so many ideas, and you get so energized by these events. It's kind of like, phew, okay, I still got to go through more notes that I made, and meeting people with these new products, and oh, it's so cool.
Like there are so many opportunities like conferences that open you up to so many ideas, and like for example, this podcast was an idea born from a conference
Okay.
because I went to a conference and I talked to so many people with years of experience that had such great wisdom. And I was like, I just want to talk to these people every day. Let me just message Joanna. No, it was like 11 p.m. my time, so it was also like 9 p.m. her time. But she was very receptive. There, here we are. Um,
That's so fun.
but but yeah, and this is my observation from attending not only ICC but other conferences too. There's a lot of open discussion, open, you know, exchange of ideas and just partnerships and just good stuff going on all the time.
It was so great. And it was so super to, like, there seemed like there were a lot of women this year at ICC, but then we had that women's breakfast and
Oh
everyone there
yeah,
together. This is amazing. That was so fun to see everybody in one place, and realize exactly how many of us there were. Cause a lot of times I'll be I'm like, I think I'm the only woman for like 5 miles. Okay, I'm going to represent us as best as I can, everybody.
the fact that they've come before me and blazed a trail,
Yeah.
whether they meant to or not. But I've always been lucky at my old integrator, where there was always a woman engineer or representative. Yeah, no, it was awesome. No, and that was a great thing to come into, as a new fresh bibby.
No, it is great.
Gals being gals.
For sure.
The title of this podcast is People Who Make Things, right?
Oh yeah.
What is something that you've made happen that you're proud of?
I'm proud of just keeping going and learning and doing new things. It's hard to narrow down to just one, but I love to solve communication problems. And I've talked about that a lot. Where never assume that someone is using a word in the same way that you're using the word if you're having a hard time understanding each other. Had an incident with we were putting together a project, and it's like, okay, there's a data sheet, and it's like, okay, so there's electronic items. We need to scan a million, well, the system that we're making needs to scan a million serial numbers. And just kind of thinking, gosh, um, so when you say data sheet, so each of these components has a data sheet, and we need to store that. Is it a PDF? Do we want to make it a blob? Where do we want to store it? How do we want to store it? And then I was like, well, wait a minute. He keeps saying the word data sheet. I want to make sure we're not assuming the wrong thing. And I was like, hey, so these data sheets, are they in PDF form? And he looks at me like I have three heads. And I finally realized what had happened. And these are all really smart people. You know how you just kind of get a different word stuck in your head? He'd meant spreadsheet, as in, can I export this whole thing as a CSV and look at it in Excel? I was like, oh, so each of these components do not have a like specifications data sheet that shows like operating temperature and all that good stuff. He's like, oh, no, no, no. They don't have that at all. I was like, oh, okay. So, suddenly this big backlog of things that had to be done just went away. So something I'm proud of is being able to drill down in a conversation and hopefully not be too annoying, and then just kind of make sure that we're on task, that we're on track, and we're making what they actually want. Because this would have added like a lot of time and a lot of expense if we hadn't sorted it out.
Exactly. It's better to, be aware of everything instead of, yes, assumptions.
Right. For sure. I'd probably say, I've got a few robot projects that I'm very proud of. During the pandemic, I put together a Stanford pupper. If you ever look that up, Stanford University, they have this low cost, almost air quotes low cost quadruped robot that you can build from their instructions, and it's super fun. It can hop and jump and walk and really freak out your dog. I'm in the process of making it a little bit more robust, but that was something I made during the pandemic, just kind of for fun. And, the pressure was on because, by the time you buy all the parts for it, you're like, okay, if I can't make this work, I have sunk X amount of dollars in this and I'm going to be mad. So very motivating. I'm hoping to get that talking to Ignition sooner rather than later, because how fun would that be?
That would be
Um,
really fun.
right?
Now that I'm in my role, I'm more exposed to the incredibly hyper-scaled architectures that Ignition lives on and is just scaled out to an incredibly big amount of whoa. So it's just awesome to see. So I can't wait for you to integrate your pupper,
Yes, indeed.
Stanford pupper, for my last question for you. Um, what would you tell yourself 2 decades ago?
Oh gosh.
Um, when you started, not quite in this industry, but in your career, what would be something that you'd tell yourself then?
I would tell myself to automate more things and to, have more systems, less manual anything, because that's really what helped then. And I could see it a little bit, but I think if I'd done more sooner, that would have been even better. And also, just to continue keep learning and staying curious and not to be, intimidated by, new ideas or learning new things, because, even if it seems like everyone's an expert, sometimes it just seems that way. And you might be a couple Google searches away from being right up there with the rest of them. Not always, but when there's new technologies, you've got to remember it's new to everybody. And so something new comes out and, the playing field levels just a little bit, and jump on it and go. Keep learning and never stop.
I think what I'm learning from your from my discussion with you is, you know, the perspective on learning, like staying curious, staying hungry, but having a positive outlook on being curious and learning, where it's not a daunting task, but it's an exciting thing to do, thing to learn, right? And keep going. So I really appreciate you coming on here and talking to me today. I learned a lot, and
Oh,
I
thanks.
love doing this because I keep learning things, life life lessons, um, but from all the guests that I have. So thank you.
Is that a wrap?
Yeah, it's a bacon wrapped episode.
Bacon wrapped episode.
Taking a
Yes.
blanket.
Bacon wrapped anything is good.